My name is Myra O'Neill, and I'm 34 years old. Last Thanksgiving, at noon, I stood in a warehouse in Columbus, Ohio, watching 300 people find their seats at the longest dinner table this city has ever set. Then, the door opened. My mother walked in. My sister came in right behind her, phone already up and recording, and a room full of laughter went quiet, row by row, like someone turning down a dial. 7 years earlier, my family left my Thanksgiving dinner on a paper plate on the front porch. My mother texted me that I wasn't clean enough to eat inside. I ate alone in my car at the end of their street, and then I drove out of their lives. What my mother did next in that warehouse, in front of 300 witnesses, is the reason I'm telling this story. But here's what none of them knew when they walked through my door. And it's bigger than the building they were standing in. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally get loud in their own way. If you've ever been made to feel like you weren't enough for your own family's table, this story is for you. Drop a comment below, and be sure to subscribe. To understand that silence in the warehouse, you have to go back 7 years, to a small town called Hartwell, and the smell of bleach on my hands. 7 years ago, I was 27, and I lived in a rented room above Kessler's Laundromat on Main Street in Hartwell, Ohio. The rent was cheap. The dryers ran until 10. My whole apartment smelled like warm lint, which honestly beat the alternative, because I spent my days smelling like industrial bleach. I worked housekeeping at the Hartwell Motor Inn, 6 till 2, and after that I cleaned private houses around town until dark. Doctors' houses, teachers' houses. The kind of houses my mother pointed at from the car when I was a kid. My hands were cracked at every knuckle. I kept a tub of hardware store salve in my glove box and a pair of church gloves for occasions, and I can tell you which one got more use. People hear cleaner and think of a mop. They don't think about the chemistry of it, the systems, the way a good cleaner walks into chaos and leaves order behind. I loved it. I was good at it. And I had a plan, written on a folded index card in my wallet. A company of my own someday, with my name on the paperwork, and real wages for real work. I'd already picked the name. I used to say it out loud while I scrubbed grout, like a prayer with rubber gloves on. That November, I was pulling doubles because the Motor Inn was short-staffed, and I was saving every tip in a coffee can I couldn't afford to touch. 2 days before Thanksgiving, my phone rang while I was flipping a mattress in room 11. My mother's voice came through crisp as a starched collar. She said dinner was at 2 o'clock sharp, that Danielle was making it a classy year, and then, before she hung up, she said the thing she always said to me. Don't embarrass me. She didn't say goodbye. Mothers like mine never do. They just leave you holding the tone. You need to see my mother's kitchen to understand my mother. I stopped by that Sunday before the holiday to drop off pie pumpkins from the farm stand, because that was my job in the family, useful, invisible, and gone by dessert. Carol O'Neill ran her kitchen like a museum with a strict docent. My sister Danielle rinsed a glass and set it in the rack, and my mother picked it up, held it to the window, and washed it again without a word. That was the whole relationship, right there, in one wet glass. My mother grew up as the daughter of a school janitor, and the kids at Hartwell High called her the janitor's kid for 4 straight years. She told that story like a medal she'd won in a war she was still fighting. She'd married my father, Walt, a parts manager with a steady check and a quiet spine, and she had spent 30 years scrubbing the smell of poverty off our family name. Danielle had married into a catering-adjacent business and a brick house with columns, which made her the good news. I emptied wastebaskets at a motel, which made me the weather. Discussed, endured, blamed. That Sunday, Danielle was spreading fan decks of cardstock across the counter, announcing that this year's dinner would be elegant, adults only at the main table. Cloth napkins, the works. My mother nodded along and said she'd ordered place cards. Place cards, for a family dinner of 10. My father looked up from the sports page, looked at the cardstock, and looked back down. That was his vote. I remember thinking place cards were a strange thing to need for people who all shared a last name. I remember wondering, just for a second, whose names would be on them. Then I let it go, because letting it go was the chore I'd done longest. I should have counted the cards. Thanksgiving morning, Rhonda quit. She was the other housekeeper on the holiday rotation at the Motor Inn, and at 9:15 she walked into the supply room, hung up her apron, and said her sister in Dayton had a spare couch with her name on it. I don't blame her. But that left 14 checkout rooms, a full linen turnover, and one me. I had planned this day like a wedding. I'd traded shifts to be done by noon. I had a garment bag hanging in my car with a clean sweater, good jeans, and the gloves, so I could walk into my mother's house looking like a daughter instead of a shift worker. Instead, I stripped beds until my forearms burned. At 11, I texted my mother. Running late. Coming straight from my shift. Save me a seat. The message flipped to read almost instantly. No reply. I told myself she was basting the turkey. At 1:30, I clocked out. Still in uniform, hair flattened, smelling like a hospital hallway, and I had a choice. 20 minutes to shower at my place and be late, or drive straight over and be almost on time. My family kept score with clocks, not with clothes, or so I thought, so I chose the clock. I drove across town with the windows cracked in November, trying to air the bleach out of my collar. I rehearsed my apology at every stoplight. Sorry I'm late, Rhonda quit, 14 rooms, you'd have done the same. At 2:40 I turned onto Birchwood Lane and saw every car already in the driveway. Danielle's SUV, my aunt's Buick, my uncle's truck with the dealer plates my father got him. The dining room window glowed gold. I saw the curtain move, just once, the way a curtain moves when someone lets it go fast. I parked at the curb, grabbed the garment bag out of habit, and walked up the path to the front door. The storm door was locked, the front door behind it was shut, and the porch light was on at 2:40 in the afternoon, which is its own kind of message. I rang the bell and heard it chime through the walls, heard chairs, heard my aunt's laugh, heard silverware, and heard nobody move toward the door. I rang again. Nothing. Then I looked down. On the top step, centered like it had been staged for a photograph, sat a paper plate covered in foil. My name was written across the foil in black marker, all capital letters. Myra. Under the foil there was turkey, a scoop of stuffing, green beans laid straight as pencils, and a dinner roll with a pat of butter already going stiff in the cold. Whoever made that plate had taken care with it. That was the part that hollowed me out. I stood on my mother's porch holding a warm plate with my name on it while my family ate on the other side of a locked door. My phone buzzed in my jacket, a text from my mother, and I can still see the shape of it on the screen. You can eat on the porch. You're not clean enough for the table. I looked through the gap in the dining room curtains, because I couldn't help it. The table was set with cloth napkins and Danielle's place cards, little white tents in front of every chair. 8 cards. 8 chairs. 8 people. Seated. Eating. Warm. I counted twice. There had never been a 9th chair. Whatever I had been to this family that morning, the table had been telling the truth about it since before the turkey went in the oven. One more thing snagged in my mind, though it took years to matter: the handwriting on the foil. My mother writes in small, slanted cursive, tight as barbed wire. The letters on my plate were big, round and careful, with a long tail on the A. It wasn't her hand. I was too busy breaking to wonder whose it was. I picked up the plate, walked back down the path, and got in my car. I drove to the end of Birchwood Lane and parked under the big sycamore because I didn't trust myself at the wheel and I didn't want them watching me sit there. I peeled back the foil and balanced my Thanksgiving on the steering wheel. The turkey was still warm. Somehow that made it worse, eating a warm meal made by hands that wouldn't open a door. I managed 3 bites. I sat there in my uniform with the engine ticking and my name on a piece of foil in my lap, and I did the math a person should never have to do. How many holidays, how many casseroles carried in through that door, how many times I'd cleaned that very house top to bottom before parties so my mother could tell her friends she'd been scrubbing all week. A tap on the passenger window nearly sent the green beans into the dash. It was Mrs. Gaines from 2 doors down, 70-something, walking her old beagle in a Christmas red coat a month early. She looked at me, looked at the plate, looked back at the glowing gold window up the street. "Honey," she said through the glass, "is that your dinner?" I smiled the smile you learn in service work, the one that keeps tips coming and questions away. "Just heading out," I told her. "Big family, small table." She stood there a second longer than politeness required, and her face did something I didn't understand until years later. She was memorizing it. Then she nodded, tugged the beagle, and moved on down the sidewalk. I set the plate on the passenger seat like it was riding along with me, and I pulled away from the curb. I drove past the house without slowing down. In the rear view, the porch light was still burning over the empty step. I didn't know it yet, but I was driving toward the rest of my life. The plate came with me. It never left. For 3 days my phone stayed silent, which told me everything about how the dinner conversation had gone after I drove off. Nobody called to ask where I went. Nobody called at all. On Sunday night, I sat on my bed above the laundromat with the dryers humming under the floor and typed out the longest text of my life. 2 full screens about the double shift, about Rhonda quitting, about the garment bag hanging in my car, about what it does to a person to read her own name on foil. I read it back twice. Then I deleted the whole thing, because explaining yourself to people who lock the door is just knocking with extra steps. I typed one line instead. I got the message. I won't bother the table again. I sent it to my mother, and then I started blocking numbers, one by one, working through the family like a checklist. My mother, Danielle, my aunt with the Buick, the cousins who'd sat at those place cards and passed the gravy. My thumb was hovering over my father's name when the phone rang in my hand and made me jump. It was Tessa, my cousin on my dad's side, the only one who ever sat with me at the kids' table long after we'd both outgrown it. She didn't say she was sorry. She said something stranger. Myra, there's something in the family group chat you're going to need to see someday. Not tonight. You're not ready tonight. But when you are, I'll have it. I asked her what it was. She wouldn't say. She just told me to keep her number unblocked and to go build a life so big I'd forget the porch existed. I kept her number. I left my father's unblocked too, though I couldn't have told you why. Then I put the phone face down, pulled my coffee can of tips out of the closet, and started counting. $1,900. That's what a coffee can hold after 2 years of tips and a security deposit refund. And that's what I moved to Columbus with the week after Thanksgiving. I rented a room by the month in a house full of nursing students, got hired for the overnight cleaning shift at a dental clinic off Sawmill Road, and learned the city by its empty parking lots. Scrubbing an operatory at 2 in the morning gives you a lot of quiet to think in. Mostly, I thought about my grandma Ruth, my dad's mother, who died 2 years before the porch and was the only person in that family who ever looked at my chapped hands like they were something to be proud of. She'd raised 4 kids on a line cook's wages and a garden. Once, when my mother made a remark about my uniform at a Sunday dinner, Ruth reached over, turned my palm up like she was reading it, and said, "Clean hands are hands that worked." She left me her recipe box when she died, and one letter I've never read out loud to anyone. Those were the only 2 things I took from Hartwell that mattered. In Columbus, I taped a torn piece of notebook paper to my bathroom mirror with a name written on it, Bright Step. The company that didn't exist yet. So it would be the first thing I saw every morning and the last thing I saw every night. And I kept one more thing, and you can decide what kind of person this makes me. The paper plate. I'd washed it, dried it flat under a stack of textbooks, and slid it into a manila envelope like a document. My roommates thought I was saving a concert ticket. Let them think it. Some people keep photographs to remember the good days. I kept a paper plate to make sure I never negotiated with the bad ones. Tessa called in January with the official version. That's what she called it. The official version. The one my mother was serving to the relatives with coffee. In that telling, I had shown up to Thanksgiving hours late, refused to come inside, grabbed a plate they'd lovingly made me, and stormed off because I was ashamed of my job and jealous of Danielle's beautiful table. My mother told it with a catch in her voice, Tessa said. She told it at church. She told it at the Hartwell Cut and Curl. She told my aunt that she'd begged me to come in and I'd screamed at her on the porch. There had been no begging and no screaming, just a locked storm door and a text message I could have framed. But here's the thing about a lie with a head start. Nobody calls to check it against the person it's about. Not one relative dialed my number that winter to ask for my side. The story fit what they already believed about me, the moody one, the one who cleaned rooms. And a comfortable lie beats an uncomfortable question at every family table in America. Tessa asked if I wanted her to set them straight. I surprised myself with how fast the answer came out. No. Let them keep the story. I'll keep the receipts of my own life. She laughed and said I sounded like Grandma Ruth. Highest compliment I've ever gotten. After we hung up, I opened the Notes app where I'd started planning BrightStep and added a line at the top that had nothing to do with cleaning. It said, "Build something they can't ignore." I looked at it for a while. Then I changed it, because spite makes a lousy foundation. The new line said, "Build something that doesn't need them." 7 years is a long time. It turned out to be exactly long enough. Year 1 was one woman, one used Corolla, and a trunk organized better than most operating rooms. Days, I kept the overnight clinic job. Nights and weekends, I picked up my own accounts. A chiropractor's office, an insurance storefront, a tax place that only got messy in April. I undercut nobody. I out-detailed everybody. The motor inn had taught me hospital corners. The dental clinic taught me the real rules, the bloodborne pathogen standards, the difference between clean and disinfected, the paper trail behind both. I spent my grocery money on a certification course at the community college and sat in the front row in my work polo, taking notes like the degree students behind me were competition, because they were. My first private client paid me with a check made out to Myra O'Neill. Wrong name, right amount. I photocopied it before I cashed it and stuck the copy to my mirror next to the torn paper that said BrightStep. Proof and a promise, side by side. The turn came on a Tuesday at the clinic. Dr. Feld, the owner, stayed late on a night I was working and watched me break down his operatory. Chair, base, hoses, the works. He asked why I was cleaning the chair's foot pedal when nobody would ever check it. I told him the truth, that patients don't check it. But germs don't care what patients check. And neither do I. He laughed. Then he stopped laughing and looked around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. "You're the only one who's ever done the pedal," he said. The cleaning company he contracted was big, cheap, and sloppy, and he'd been unhappy with them for 2 years. He didn't offer me anything that night, but he started leaving the radio on for me and every so often, a note on the front desk. The notes got longer. Then one of them was a question. The question was, "What would you charge to take this whole building yourself?" I named a number that was fair instead of desperate, which took every muscle in my body. Dr. Feld said yes before I finished the sentence. Then he said the thing that changed my life more than the money did. "Get yourself an LLC and insurance, because I'd rather pay a company than a person, and you should be a company." 6 weeks later, I stood in a strip mall print shop holding the first page of BrightStep Cleaning LLC's operating agreement, my name typed on the line where names go, and I carried it to my car like a newborn. And then, in the parking lot, in the driver's seat where nobody could see me, I came apart. Big, ugly, grateful sobbing, forehead on the wheel, the whole performance. The last time I'd sat in a parked car with something that mattered in my lap, it was turkey on a paper plate. Same seat, different cargo. I let myself have 10 minutes and then I fixed my face, because I had a walkthrough at 4. That week held one more envelope, and I almost missed it. It came through the mail forwarding I'd set up when I left Hartwell, a fat business envelope from a bank, addressed to me at my old room above the laundromat. I figured it was a closed account notice and threw it in the passenger seat, where it rode around for 3 days like the plate once had. I want to be honest about why I didn't open it. Mail from Hartwell felt like the Porch in paper form. Anything that town wanted to hand me, I'd already been handed. But an envelope from a bank with my name through the window isn't a memory, it's a document. On the 3rd night, parked outside the clinic at midnight, I finally tore it open. It was a past due notice for a second mortgage, my parents' names at the top, my old address in the window because of a contact sheet I'd once filled out at their kitchen table. The loan was 90 days behind. The number owed monthly sat there in bold, and I knew that number the way you know your own birthday, because for 3 years, that exact amount had left my account on the 1st of every month, in cash, into my mother's hand. She called it gas money. That was the fiction that let her take it. "Myra, help your mother with gas," she'd say, and I'd hand over an envelope that would have bought enough gas to drive to both coasts and back, monthly. I knew where it really went. She knew I knew. The word gas just kept her from having to say the sentence out loud. The janitor's kid's daughter, the one who isn't clean enough, is the one keeping the house. My father took early retirement the year his back gave out, and the second mortgage had come due behind that, and quiet envelopes from the daughter with the chapped hands had been holding the walls up. The payments stopped the week of the porch. Not a strategy. I just moved, and nobody called, and an envelope you hand to someone who locks you out is called a donation. 90 days behind. I did the math against the calendar and it lined up to the week. I sat in my car outside the clinic and waited to feel guilty, and what came instead was colder and steadier, like tile under bare feet. They knew what stopped when I left. They'd counted on my back the same way they'd counted their chairs. I wrote the date on the outside of the envelope, filed it in the glove box, and sent nothing. You want to know what happens to a house when the invisible daughter goes visible somewhere else? Keep watching. By year 3, Bright Step was me plus 2, and I picked those 2 the way I wished someone had once picked me. Rosa was a single mom who'd been fired from a chain service for missing a shift when her kid had strep. She showed up to the interview with a reference letter from a client she'd cleaned for privately, which told me she understood receipts. Dale was a 60-year-old Army veteran who ironed his work shirt to interview for a job stripping wax off floors. I hired them both on the spot and paid a wage that made my accountant sigh, because I'd done this work my whole life and I knew exactly what it costs the body doing it. We specialized where nobody wanted the hassle: medical and dental offices, real standards, real inspections, real consequences. Turns out consequences are a moat. The sloppy outfits stayed away, and the referrals came to us. I set exactly one company rule that had nothing to do with disinfectant, and I set it on Rosa's first day, when I caught her eating a sandwich standing over the janitor's sink like an apology. Nobody eats standing up. Not on my clock. Every Bright Step site got a break table and enough chairs, real chairs, and lunch happened sitting down. All of us, like people. Rosa thought it was a quirk. Dale, who had eaten off a lot of tailgates and hoods in his life, understood it immediately and never once ate before everyone was seated. I never explained it. Explaining it would have meant telling them about a porch in Hartwell, and back then I still kept that plate in its envelope like a classified file. Word got around town anyway, the way word does. A clinic manager told a colleague, who told her sister, and one day I overheard our newest client describe us on the phone as the ones who treat cleaners like people. Best marketing line we never wrote. Tessa kept a wire open to Hartwell for me, whether I asked or not. She'd call folding laundry, and I'd fold towels for the supply bins on my end, and she'd give me the town like a weather report. Danielle and Rick got married in a tent with a string quartet and gold-rimmed rentals, which Tessa described as a wedding designed to be photographed rather than attended. Rick had a food distribution business, Prescott Provisions, that supplied restaurants and school kitchens across 2 counties, and Danielle had taken over its image, its invoicing, and most of its sentences. My name did not come up at the wedding. My name did not come up anywhere, except once. Tessa got quiet in the middle of one of those calls in year 4 and said, "You should probably know what your mom says when people ask about you." I said I could guess. She said, "No, it's specific. She tells people you clean toilets in Columbus. She says it like